work means that we're not just looking out to the future, but we are actually giving people opportunities to do the changes right now. I know at the University of Hawaii, even as we were getting started, Pearl will tell you stories of how they've been able to make certain decisions just based on preliminary data, on doing some of the things a little bit differently in campus. I think one of the things I have heard from our Hawaii colleagues has been that it's also enabled conversations on campuses that might not have been held in the same ways that they had been held before, because people understand more about what's going on. So with that, I'm thrilled that Dr. Joel Hartman is here, because as one of our PAR partners, you know, when we were putting together the second round of schools, we were looking for who would our dream partners be, and I have to tell you that UCF was a dream partner because of all the amazing data work and the data sensibilities on the campus. So when they agreed to come on, we were thrilled. We're learning tons. I'm thrilled that Joel is here today, and what I'd like to do now, Joel, is to turn it over to you to let you tell people about the things you are doing at UCF.
Thanks, Ellen. Ellen's done a great job of giving you sort of the 30,000-foot view or environment of how these big data techniques are working their way into decision-making, planning, and performance changes in higher education. I'm going to try to bring it down to ground level and talk a little bit about how we at our institution are trying to leverage big data to accomplish some very specific objectives. And I would say that what I'm talking about, or the general things I'm going to share with you, would apply at any kind of institution at any level, including state and regional systems. And so these are things that we could all think about and do. When we think about data and information, it's interesting to wind the clock back a few decades and to think or maybe reflect or even remember. I mean, many of us can remember carrying decks of cards around. I won't go that far back. But if you think about how data has been used in higher education, throughout our history, we've been largely anecdote-driven, right? It happened to me, it'll happen to you, or I heard this, or I read that, or I had this airline magazine I just finished. And largely, data was something that came into the institution and, like Hotel California, never got out, you know. So as we've gone forward, we've changed from physical means of carrying data around on printouts and cards and punch things and tapes and moved into the electronic domain. And in the 80s, the idea of databases or structured data that allow data to have form and substance and repeatability and reliability and transferability, all of those abilities came in the 80s. And then in the 90s, we began to get sophisticated about how to think about data, and we began to build things called data marts and data warehouses and online analytical processing and drill down, business intelligence, decision support, that is, we began to make use of the data coming out of these repositories and into the halls of the academy where decisions are made and planning was done. But I would say largely our focus on data has been one of reporting as opposed to utilizing. We report to our state boards, to our accreditors, to all kinds of folks who want to know everything that's going on. And we always have this suspicion that the amount of information going out is only a fraction of that which ever gets read, but there it goes. And now we're entering a new era of big data in which data are taking on truly strategic value because they hold the promise to give us the means to fundamentally change things that in history we may have regarded as unchangeable, unaffectable. And so I'd like to talk from the perspective of an institution about a process of building an information architecture that can lead to big data, that can lead to improved decision making, that can lead to improved performance for the institution and its students. And these are some of the things that constitute what I call an information architecture, but it's intentional, it's deliberate, and it's comprehensive in terms of building a framework within the institution that has some sense of what data are needed, what processes will create the data in a form that everyone will trust it, will use it, can have access to it, and can share it, given the appropriate data governance and concerns about data availability. And of course, the session that's going to follow us will go into great detail on some of how to maintain and design those protections. And to know that there are various users at various levels who have very different information needs, and we need to design systems and methods that will provide resources to fulfill those needs, some of whom are pretty technically sophisticated and some of whom are very not sophisticated, and so we need a range of methods of accessing those data. in support of information-driven planning and decision-making. You've heard the words analytics, and along comes the term data scientist. In fact, those of you who are thinking about careers, programs you may have for your students, data science is one of the 21st century hot careers, because there are very few people who really understand how to do this at this level, and the demand for them is going to be extraordinary. It is already extraordinary. It's going to be extraordinary. And there are very few institutions who have taken on data science as an academic field. Okay? But what you do is you turn these massive sets of data into insight. You comb the data, you massage the data, you whip the data around till it confesses, and eventually you find things that are going on inside these massive pools of data that were hidden from view because they are so nuanced and so tiny at the event level. And from that, you can begin to discern the patterns and behaviors, actions of individual players, individual circumstances, individual behaviors that can be used to now go from cohort-based, backward-looking, last semester's freshmen, last year's transfers, to individuals and future orientations, and that will give us powerful predictive capabilities. We all know there are barriers to acting on these, and these are a few of them. But I would say largely the primary barrier is a lack of vision, understanding, and familiarity with what you need to do this and what the benefits might be if you achieve it. Because the benefits, I will tell you, will far outweigh the cost, and will give your institution or system tools that you can leverage on into the future to get a handle on the things you wish to change or improve, to do or stop doing, that will give you the ability to make those decisions with a high level of confidence and on into the future determine if the path you selected was the correct one. And so perhaps the bottom one is the most important one, and this is a mantra that some of my staff tell me is, I can't analyze data we don't collect. And so we tend to be more inclusive of the information we collect, even if we don't have a short-term use for it. This rather busy diagram is easy to understand if you think about it from the bottom to the top. The bottom are the institutional databases, data sets, some of which may be external to the institution or live in the cloud or a hosting facility. It matters not. They're selected databases that collectively give us the range of information we want to draw upon to create insights. Human resources, student, CRM is constituent relationship, finance, learning management system, whatever it may happen to be, advising systems. Anything that has to do with the circumstances, characteristics, and behaviors of the target populations can be useful. The middle layer are the processing tools where the data goes to live and be processed. And these are tools that adapt to different levels of users. Some of them are big data. The little box on the left, which is labeled RDS, Reporting Data Store, is a tool that integrates data access with desktop tools, so you have ready access to go to your desktop computer, whatever it may be, look into the data, pull out your reports, and so on. Then at the top are all the array of end users and end user tools that can draw upon these data resources and make appropriate uses of them. Collectively, this is an information architecture that has the following characteristics. There are at the base sources of truth that the institution agrees upon and can rely upon in terms of accuracy, timeliness, and accessibility. The tools in the middle are established in order to maintain access, to serve the needs of various constituencies, and to provide outputs that are actually meeting the needs of individuals and units on campus. And then finally, the desktop is where you access it, and today that would, of course, include mobile devices such as iPads, iPhones, and so on and so forth. Okay. Where we are going with this in one particular initiative that I'll talk about today is in the arena of student success. And we have identified going in first the goals, and these are the 3 goals that we're attempting to achieve with our Student Success Initiative, which will be based on big data. The initiative has several components, and I'll talk about them in order. The first is the big data component. We are participating, as Ellen indicated, in the PAR project, and we also are participating in a big data project headed by a startup company called Civitas Learning. They're one of the early companies in the market, venture funded and establishing commercial presence. And the two work very differently. The Civitas project is one where you send them terabytes of data out of your systems. They massage the data, eye of newt, wing of bat, do the data science, and give you back insights into the information that relate to student behaviors in a way that you can drill down to individual circumstances and decisions, and I'll elaborate on that in just a bit. And then the PAR project, which is half data science and insight and half interventions, which I think with the multiple institutions involved of different types is going to be a rich source of what really works, how to make it work, and how to make it work better. The second part of the project is to improve our own internal tools for degree audit, degree mapping, degree tracking, so that we can give students the best advice in terms of the decisions they make about the courses they take, the order they take them, the combination they're taking at the same time. There are, after all, toxic combinations that are known to be high sources of student failure. And to put that track in place, map it carefully, and then use big data to inform individual student decisions. And then finally, we have an institution-wide, and I mean institution-wide initiative, supported by many areas on campus that have to do with student contact, everything from housing to advising, who are formulating interventions based not only on what we find from the data, but also what we find from things that happen to students in their own lives and housing and social activities and so on that are known to be sources of student difficulties or failure or dropout. From these, we're going to hopefully get then the ability to be predictive as opposed to descriptive. Descriptive is important. Predictive, we think, has the greater power. Descriptive is simply what is, how many, who, where. And predictive has to do with navigating paths through the institutional maze and to look at individual student patterns of action and to be able to determine before a student has difficulty when that may occur and to have some idea what to do about it in advance. So we're moving from retrospective to predictive and from cohort-based to individual. And so thus comes these two projects whose data will be represented to the institution in the form of dashboards. This may be a little light to see, I hope you can see it, but it's an example of one of the dashboards from the Civitas project, which allows you to filter in various ways. In the upper right corner is a box that lists a set of risk factors that identify with the population that you're looking at, and those risk factors were deduced from the data itself. You can use the middle box to select various groups, and at the bottom up comes a series, in this case, of programs showing you the percentage of at-risk students, and then you can use that dashboard to drill down to the individual level and determine which specific students are at risk, the level of risk, the nature of risk, which allows you to turn this into interventions to take those particular groups of students as segments and treat them individually. This is an example like the one Ellen showed you of the PAR dashboard, and once again, it's programmable in that you can tune it to look at the particular segments of students, risk factors, amount of risk, programs, levels of programs, whatever the variables may be, and there are multiple dashboards, which gives you the ability to manipulate the outcomes, the data outcomes from these large data sets in a way that you can then expose this information to individual students. But again, both of the two I just showed you are based on samples of data that are time-based, right? Last semester, the semester, and so on and so forth. So to some extent, they are retrospective, but from it, you can get predictive insights as to particular groups of students and narrow it down. What I think is going to be the breakthrough in this is the addition of learning management system data. And this is an example of a dashboard inside our learning management system, and it's read in the following way. The top horizontal bar, which is labeled activity, shows examples of blue, students actually reading and consuming information in the course, and gold, contributing information to the course in terms of submissions and assignments and emails and chats and so on and so forth. The middle bar represents communication between the student and the faculty member. The students is in gold, the faculty members is in blue. When you see a lot, you see engaged students and faculty. When you see nothing, you see troubles. At the bottom is an example of students submitting assignments. The diamond represents the due date. If it was submitted early, you see a green bar to the left. If it was submitted late, you see a yellow bar to the right. If it was missing, you see a red diamond, and you see if the students are actually completing the work. I just had a request from our financial aid office who said, I need to see this because we have to talk about student completion of their courses in terms of financial aid Do we have to return money to DOE and so on and so forth? This dashboard will give them the tools they need to determine students' substantive academic engagement in the course, when it began, when it ended, and so on, for that purpose as well. So it's not just academic needs this can fulfill, but others. The advantage of blending learning management system data is that it's the only source of information we have at our disposal that tracks student behavior minute by minute, day by day, course by course, semester by semester. And success occurs that way. It doesn't occur in years. It occurs by minute, by day, by semester, by course. And we have determined, as have other institutions, there are patterns of behavior that associate with heavy risk and patterns of behavior that associate with success. We can automate notices to students and faculty. We can automate notices to advisors. We can send out the troops if we have to. We can determine when a student is about to get into trouble, and we can intervene. And the blending of institutional large data sets with LMS data, I think, will be the secret sauce that will give us the ability to substantively intervene and improve student outcomes before trouble occurs. Our Progress Initiative, which is the intervention or student support initiative, includes campus offices who represent these 4 series of activities. And it's being headed up by an administrative team headed by our Vice President for Student Support, Student Development, and Enrollment Services. It includes about 130 people across campus, each of whom is contributing insight on issues that students may have, actions that can be taken to alleviate it, business processes that can be changed, information that's needed, and to turn the information we're going to get out of our big data into actions, and hopefully into improved student success. Ellen and I are available for questions in the 7 or so minutes remaining.
Thank you both. I've got a question here in a minute, but I wanted to share something that memory that Joel prompted with the term data science. I first went to a big data and analytics conference about 1.5 years ago, and it was the first one I'd gone to. I felt I needed to educate myself a little bit about this environment. I felt very comfortable that this would be something that we would be talking about for the next few years. And 3 things became very apparent very quickly in this conference of about 1,000 people. I was about 20 years older than the average. I was overdressed. I should have been wearing jeans and had my shirt rolled up. And I was one of the 10 people or so out of the 1,000 that did not identify themselves as a data scientist. And I realized that there was a shift coming that I had not anticipated. And I've been mucking around in data and information resources my entire career, and I had not realized that this was coming. The other thing that happened is there was not a single bit of discussion at that meeting about education. And this is where my question comes from. Richard Collada at the Department of Education, and Ellen, you'll remind me, he's either Chief Information Officer or Chief Technologist. Chief is in there. Yeah. So he's up, top tiers. Collada makes the claim that given the number of students we have in our tens of thousands of school districts in K-12, the number of students we have in our 7,000 institutions of higher education, all of the coursework that those students take over a 20-year time span mean that we actually have the ability in education to become the biggest user of big data and analytics, outstripping Google, outstripping Amazon, what have you. My question for you guys is that real? Is that a possibility? Education really being one of the biggest, if not the biggest user?
Well, I've spoken to Richard about that. I actually had an opportunity at a meeting a couple of weeks ago. And part of what he's proposing is the unified data set of tracking a student from kindergarten through PhD and so on, and truly mapping a student's total educational experience. And there's some issues with that, of course, in Congress. But I think what he's dealing with, though, is more traditional kinds of tracking of student behavior and performance and grades and so on and so forth. I think what we're talking about is more behavioral kinds of data. For example, it is known that there are course combinations that, if taken in the wrong sequence, are fatal for most students and often turn them away from programs in which we'd like to increase enrollment, like STEM programs and so on and so forth. And so my sense is that the longitudinal data will be useful to track the student's total educational experience. But I'm a little bit more excited personally about these analytics that deal with student success and can be used to keep students on track and get them graduating and do it in less time with fewer excess credit hours and all the things that we're eventually going to be funded on. So that would be my approach to it.
Yeah, and I guess my response to that is, I've actually talked with Richard about this as well, and I guess my question to him would be, well, but why would you want to do that? I mean, what would you get from that, other than a really good picture of what it looked like to do that? I mean, as you might be able to tell, I mean, I've certainly come from the academy, but working with some of these systems, ultimately focusing on decisions that we can do something about right now matters a lot. So the idea of tracking to get that picture is really helpful, but if I'm trying to figure out how to deal with Math 101 students who really need to figure out how we get different ways of making them succeed right now, I like the fact that there are going to be parallel conversations about this, and I do think that we are going to get to that point, but I think I would hope that all of us would ask the question, if we start moving down those paths with all the things we can do with data, what is it that we can actually do with the results that we find that makes it actionable?
Yeah, the interventions, the actions are the important part.
Yeah.